Most people would talk about frame tactically. I want to talk about its essence, because ultimately these men that I encounter that are as mediocre as I say, that is what they're lacking. They're lacking frame. What is frame? Frame is congruence. Once you can exert that congruence, once you can exert that power over others, you do so effortlessly. Your outer actions are congruent with your inner self. It's about self-belief, and belief is intangible. Welcome back to Men and the City. Hope you're all doing well. I am currently in Mexico City. I had left Argentina a few weeks ago, so I wanted to make a little bit of a walk and talk video, something I haven't done in a while. So today's video is going to be called Frame and Femininity. Mexico City, by the way, just a few quick facts that you might find interesting if you decide to come here. Mexico City was founded by the Aztecs in the 14th century, and at that time it was basically a lake, and they built an island in the center of it where about 300,000 some odd people came to form the largest city in the world at the time, bigger than any city, at least in Europe. So an interesting place. It's also the site of Trotsky's death. So some of you may know that there was an NKVD agent named Ramon Mercader, who I think stabbed Trotsky with an ice pick or something like that. I don't remember the exact details. But anyway, so in August 1940, Trotsky was killed in Mexico City by none other than Stalin. So quite an interesting place to be, and an international city at that. Anyway, in today's video, we're going to talk about the crisis of mediocrity. So one of the things that we all notice in our day and age is that men are hurting. That's true. There is a crisis of masculinity. There are sexless men. There is an economic crisis that has condemned a lot of men to the ash heap of history, if you will. They don't have homes. They don't have access to the opportunity, you might say, that others do. But more than anything, what I see is a crisis of mediocrity. And let me be very clear about exactly what I mean by that. As someone that does travel quite a bit, as most of you know, I observe Western men in particular wherever I go. They're all over the place. They're in Mexico City, they're in Argentina, they're in different parts of Europe and Asia. And what's stunning about most of them is how utterly mediocre they are. And that's not to condemn them. It is, however, to say that a lot of them are overweight. A lot of them have stupid tattoos. A lot of them are not well educated. A lot of them are not particularly impressive individuals. And one should note that a lot of that is independent of how much money they make or the social status that they have. When I lived in Miami, for example, I met a lot of guys that were very wealthy, that lived in very posh high-rises and drove nice cars, and they were some of the most unimpressive people I have ever met. Why is that? Well, it's because of this thing called frame. What is frame? Well, there are many ways to define it, one of which that I think is interesting is an unspoken context that sets the rules of any interaction. That's one way to define it. Another way to define it is a kind of interpersonal dominance between you and the other person. Sometimes when people talk about frame, they think in terms of an office interview. So when you go to interview for a job, you walk in, you're properly attired, but you are naturally lower than the person who's interviewing you. And oftentimes that means they're better dressed than you are, or they're sitting in a higher chair, or they have some kind of office backdrop that conveys their authority. And sometimes that's what people think frame really is. It's just celebrity, or it's social proof of some kind. it's institutional authority. But that's not really the case. And that's what this video is all about. Most people would talk about frame tactically. I want to talk about its essence. Because ultimately, these men that I encounter that are as mediocre as I say, that is what they're lacking. They're lacking frame. What is frame? Frame is congruence. It's congruence between your outer actions and your inner self. And in order to acquire that congruence, it demands a kind of self-discovery, a kind of self-improvement, but also an understanding of your identity. So I was talking to a younger guy about this recently, a friend of mine, and I explained it to him like this. A lot of people think frame is wearing expensive clothing, wearing a bespoke suit or nice handmade Italian shoes and getting in and out of a nice car. But that's not really what it is, which is why there are a lot of rich guys out there that will pay top dollar for dating coaches to help them with women. Because women are very adept, naturally, at sensing your frame, which is independent of wealth. Again, I emphasize this for all you guys that think that you can't achieve success with females or you can't build frame without money. That's not true. Frame is not about those things. Frame is having clothing that actually fits you properly and reflects who you really are. And ironically enough, when you wear clothing like that, or you build a home or a personality or a career that's reflective of your true identity, what you really believe in, other people can sense that. That congruency becomes power. Now, power in this respect is not something that you communicate directly. It's not something that you tell other people. It's unspoken, it's intuitive, it is illogical, it's a feeling, it's a sentiment. So men think power is something that's logical, something that you can measure. And in some cases it is, but that's not what frame is all about. Frame is about the intangible. It's about the ethereal, the sentiment, the feeling. And that's so important to understand, because once you can exert that congruence, once you can exert that power over others, you do so effortlessly. It's sort of like athletes that are in the zone when they talk about it. And for those of you that play sports, you probably felt it too. When you're in the zone, you're not really doing anything. You're just sort of congruent. Your outer actions are congruent with your inner self. It's about self-belief, and belief is intangible. Frame is so important because ultimately that congruency is what women really want. And it becomes a kind of gravitational force that allows you to pull other women towards you. In some cases, it will also repel women who are not good for you. That's what frame is really all about. How do you achieve that? Well, you have got to embark upon self-discovery. You've got to really tap into who you are as a person and sort of decouple from what other people think and do. This is why wealth is not the cornerstone of frame. It's why you can be a powerful corporate executive, but an extremely weak person with no frame. And I'm sure many of you have observed that. That's not what you want. What you want is to figure out, what do you really believe in? What is your value set? And then you want to perfect that value set. You want to generate excellence based upon the worldview that you have established. And that will create frame and lift you out of mediocrity. Stay tuned for more, and we'll talk soon.